r/ProRevenge. Posted by user, the lovely landlord. Your lease is still valid? Even though you were evicted? Okay. I'll try to keep the details vague enough to keep me anonymous, hence the dummy account. This might be a little long, buckle in. I am the landlord of some apartments in the city. I sign the lease agreements, and go over the basics with tenants, although they don't usually want me to spend hours delving into the fine print. 99% of the time, it's a breeze, and everything is fine. One lady, let's call her Karen, had been paying her rent via a new bank account, and new checks for the last several months. All of a sudden, we got several chargeback fees on our account. She had put a stop payment on the checks, and closed the account. I immediately called her. Hey, Karen, it looks like your checks bounced for the last few months. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay.
Oh no. I promise I'll get this fixed.
Okay. You've been a good tenant in the past, so I'll give you a month. Needless to say, a month passed, and she didn't pay. So I called her again. Hey, Karen, we still haven't received payment, so I'm afraid we'll have to file for eviction.
Oh God no, I'm an old woman, I can't afford to be evicted, I'm trying so hard to pay. Can you give me another shot?
As long as you pay before the court date, the eviction doesn't have to go through. The court date arrives, and guess who hasn't paid yet? At court, the judge rules for a 24-hour notice to vacate. Karen, in tears, comes up to me afterwards.
Can you please give me another chance? I can't afford to go anywhere else.
I'm sorry, Karen, but the only way I could do that is if you paid off the debt, signed a new lease agreement, plus a first month's rent, plus a new security deposit. And I don't think that's going to happen. Goodbye. So I left, and I thought that was that. My maintenance guy would come in a few days to do the inspection and clean up, and then we'd put it on the market. He shows up a few days later, and there's a problem. They're still there. So I call the sheriff, to schedule a set out. A problem though. According to the sheriff, the 24-hour notice was no longer valid, as we had struck up a deal afterwards, so the court had reversed the eviction decision. I had no recollection of having decided that this would happen. I called the court, and they informed me that the eviction was no longer valid, as apparently I told the sheriff that I was giving her more time, invalidating the decision, etc. What happened was that Karen had called the sheriff, and told him that the court had reversed the decision, because of a non-existent deal. She had then called the court, and told them that the sheriff could not evict her, as I had waived the notice. And she had used my words, twisting my denial of an extension into a deal. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I sent Karen a copy of a new lease agreement, asking for the debts, in addition to rent for the first month, and a new security deposit. Her lawyer then contacted me. Yes, she had the money to hire a lawyer, somehow informing me that, in fact, her old lease agreement was still valid, as my deal, the one that would require a new lease agreement, invalidated the eviction decision. So I filed for eviction, on the grounds that she had not paid for several months now, 5 to be exact, and therefore had invalidated her old lease agreement. And then, I read her old lease agreement. I already know these contracts pretty well, but as I said, I don't usually delve into the minutia. This time, I did. We show up at court. Karen has her lawyer. Karen is bursting, grinning like a fool, like she's won the lottery. Her lawyer looks fairly happy as well. The judge asks me to speak. I would like Karen to leave the apartments, but she is refusing, despite the fact that according to the court's last decision, she should have left over a month ago now.
And, Miss Karen?
Miss Karen cannot be ejected from her home without a new notice. Yes, she has not yet paid past due rent, however, she and the landlord struck up a deal, giving her the time she needed to pay via verbal agreement. This deal, made directly after the last court date, invalidated the last decision, so Miss Karen will require a new decision, and therefore, a new notice, before she can rightfully be evicted from her home. Until then, her lease agreement is still valid.
And landlord? What do you have to say?
Well, Your Honor, I have to agree. They have made a very compelling argument. Karen and I did indeed make a deal, giving her the time she needed to pay. And yes, her old lease agreement is still valid, I guess. Well, according to the terms of the still valid lease, there are some additional things that the court needs to be aware of, that I'd like to go over for clarification. I'm sure you have a copy, Your Honor.
Yes, I do.
And you have a copy, lawyer?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Well, Your Honor, if you look at Section 4, subsection A, on page 2, you will see that after 10 days of non-payment, a late fee of $100 is applied. If you continue reading to subsection B, you will see that after 15 days of non-payment, additional late fees of $10 per day are applied, until full payment is rendered. If you continue to subsection C, you will see that failed payments necessitate a chargeback fee of $50 per failed payment. If you will continue, Your Honor, to page 4, section 7, subsection F, you will see that if a tenant is in any way responsible for a loss of rent, including leaving an apartment in less than move-in ready condition, failed payments, or lastly, refusal to vacate in the case of an eviction, the tenant is responsible for payment of said loss of rent, in addition to any other debts owed. In addition, on page 8, section 14, subsection A, you will note that the tenant is responsible for any and all legal fees resultant from the eviction process, including attorney's fees, such as for the attorney I hired to help me review this lease agreement. Finally, on page 10, the last page, section 17, subsection B, you will see that the tenant is responsible for all HVAC services rendered on their unit. As we sent in a company to fix the unit in Karen's apartment at her request, we have the invoice here for the replacement unit in addition to the totals for all of the fees listed. At this point, the lawyer has gone completely pale. It's clear that he was more concerned that I would fight the whole deal thing, than the terms of the lease he thought he'd have to fight to keep valid. Karen looks utterly shell-shocked, her mouth slightly agape, like a child confused by a game of peekaboo. The judge, meanwhile, is completely unfazed, until I hand her the invoice, alongside my maths, a spreadsheet, and a piece of paper with the total debt owed circled and highlighted at the bottom of the page. Her eyes widened to the size of her mouth, as her jaw dropped with an audible gasp. As you can see, Your Honor, the total owed is in excess of $16,000. I will happily accept the payment in the form of a cashier's check. I'd hate to have to charge yet another $50 fee for failed payment, should another personal check bounce.
Lawyer, do you have anything to say?
At this point, the lawyer looks like he's about to pass out. Karen seems to have stopped breathing. The judge remains silent for a moment, and then collects himself.
I'm afraid you'll have to address that matter of debt in a different court than this one, landlord. We are here only to judge whether Miss Karen is to be evicted from her home today.
Oh, if she wants to stay, I'd be happy to let her. As long as she agrees to continue to abide by the terms of the lease agreement, specifically those clauses outlined above. And pays the debt owed today.
I'm going to rule for a 24-hour notice to vacate, unless Miss Karen can produce payment at this moment.
Karen sits, still, quiet, speechless even. Her lawyer is eyeing the window, I like to think contemplating his decisions in life that led him to this point. Maybe thinking about jumping, I don't know.
Right, a 24-hour notice to vacate. And, landlord?
Yes?
You will want to file those charges in small claims court. Or a higher court, if it exceeds the amount that you can legally pursue in small claims.
Already filed, Your Honor. The case has now been resolved. And needless to say, I got a fairly significant bonus, in addition to a slight raise. TLDR, tenant was evicted, but lied to get out of the eviction, claiming her old lease was still valid. I then used the terms of her old lease to get a payout of, at the end of it all, about $20,000, and my boss gave me a big chunk of it as a bonus. Boom. Posted by user, guy named Mo. Mean lady hates everyone. Especially us. We buy her house after she failed to pay her debt. First of all, English isn't my first language, but I'll try my best. I'm on mobile, so formatting may be shit. The house we live in was built at the same time as hers. My parents were often at the construction site and would help if they could. The strange lady was nice to us at the beginning. But that changed soon. This happened around Christmas 2017. We have a neighbor who is very unpopular in our neighborhood. She is well known for harassing people who use the public path on the left side of her house. The path is 1 out of 3 to reach the public playground behind her house. If someone uses the path, she would scream at them that this is her path on her private property, which is wrong. Sometimes she would close the path with a red and white plastic chain and won't let anyone use the path. She would scream at kids on the playground when they were loud, at daytime. She always has her shutters almost down so she can stalk the people on the street and stay unseen. If some kid's ball landed in her garden, she would bring it to the kids, and destroy it with a knife right in front of them. All kids knew this and would run by her house if they wanted to go on the playground. When the neighbors' kids were playing in the winter outside in the snow, she would call the CPS equivalent in my country, and tell them they were locked outside by their parents as a punishment. If someone walked by her house at night, she would often call the police due to a noise complaint. She was known by everyone in our neighborhood as the witch. But she hated my family in particular. We lived right beside her house. Our houses shared one wall. When me and my sister were young, we would use the swing in our garden or jump on our trampoline. She would regularly file noise complaints, and often harass me and my sister when we were alone in our garden. If my parents heard her screaming swear words at us from the first floor of her house, they would yell back. If me or my sister walked on the path by her house, she would scream at us. We used the path daily on our way to school. One time when I came home from school, she was in her car with the trunk on the sidewalk. When I walked by the back of her car, she howled the engine and the dark exhaust hit me. Almost every night she would hit the shared wall with something to wake us up. Sometimes she rings on our door, and tries to make us go to other neighbors to complain about small things. We often had lawsuits with her. One time because her trees grew 2 meters over the border. Another time because she built a fence by sticking bamboo mats in the dirt, and tearing it down the next day and telling the police we destroyed her wooden fence. We won all lawsuits against her because my uncle, he's teaching law school, gave us good advice on how to deal with her, and named lawyers he knew were good. She never paid the workers who repaired things at her house, and the electrical and water bills. When her old car broke down, she didn't pay the car mechanic and never got her car back. She was in debt and had a mortgage on her house. When the foreclosure came, we were at the court and we bought her house. She was with us in the courtroom when the auction was and tried to buy her own house, but wasn't allowed because she couldn't provide proof that she has enough money. We bought her house where she lived for 20+ years in front of her. We bought it because my parents were at the construction of her house and knew the workers did a great job at building it. We renovated it when she left. We repainted all rooms, renewed the insulation and put everywhere where there were no tiles, new wooden floors. My grandparents will be moving into her old house this fall. TLDR, neighbor harassed the whole neighborhood and was extra mean to kids. She didn't pay bills and had a mortgage on her house. We bought it in front of her for my grandparents. If you liked these stories, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. You can upvote these stories by pressing the links in the description. If you want to hear more stories from me, hit the subscribe button, and press the bell icon to be alerted when a new video is posted.